Ex-husband mocked the ex-wife during the board review until a sealed dossier shattered his authority. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main characters. Alex Thompson and Emily Green had always been at odds. Once, they had been a married couple, but after their divorce, the tension between them only grew. What once was a partnership filled with love and compromise was now a battlefield, and this time, the arena was their high-powered corporate board meeting. Alex had always been the more dominant of the two. A successful businessman, well respected by his peers, and used to getting his way, Alex was not known for showing mercy, especially not to Emily. As they sat across from each other at the long, polished boardroom table, Alex couldn't help but throw a sharp comment in Emily's direction. His voice was cold, mocking even. I wonder, Emily, do you actually think your ideas are worthy of our attention today? Or are we just here to humor you? The room went silent, all eyes turning to Emily. She kept her gaze steady, her expression unreadable. Emily, though, had changed. The years since their divorce had made her more resilient, more determined to stand her ground. She wasn't about to let Alex's arrogance get the better of her. Still, the words stung, and for a moment she hesitated. But only for a moment. Alex, she began, her voice calm but firm. Maybe it's time you stop underestimating me. You're not in control anymore. The room shifted uneasily. The tension between them was palpable. What Alex didn't know was that Emily had come prepared. She had something in her hands that would change everything. But for now, she let the moment linger, watching as Alex basked in the brief victory of mocking her. She waited for the right moment to strike. As the meeting progressed, Alex continued his subtle jabs, confident that he could push Emily to the edge. But little did he know the sealed dossier she had brought with her was about to shatter his carefully crafted authority. The meeting was far from over, and neither was the fight. Stay tuned to see how Emily's quiet determination turned the tables. I remember the moment Emily made her move. Alex had spent the better part of the meeting throwing jabs at her, thinking he was in complete control. But Emily wasn't rattled. As the boardroom filled with tense silence, she calmly opened her briefcase and pulled out the sealed dossier. The room quieted, all eyes now on her. She didn't make a grand announcement. No dramatic pause. She simply placed the folder in front of her, keeping her gaze locked on Alex, who had been smirking just moments ago. Alex's expression shifted immediately, from the cocky, self-assured businessman to a man trying to gauge the situation. He leaned forward, eyebrows furrowed. What is that? He asked, his voice carrying a hint of uncertainty. Emily didn't respond right away. Instead, she slowly flipped open the dossier, making sure everyone could see the contents. The look on Alex's face told her everything. He had no idea what was coming. The room held its breath as Emily began to read from the pages, her voice steady but powerful. This, she said, pausing briefly to let her words sink in, is a report that has been sealed until now. A report that reveals some very uncomfortable truths about your actions, Alex. The room felt even colder. Alex's eyes darted from Emily to the faces of their colleagues, but no one spoke. No one moved. Emily continued, her voice unwavering. It seems, Alex, that while you've been mocking my every move, you've been hiding some crucial information from the board. Information that could change the course of this company's future. Alex swallowed, his previous confidence slipping. Emily knew he was trying to keep his composure, but it was clear that he wasn't prepared for this. The report detailed a series of unethical business practices that Alex had been involved in, things that could seriously jeopardize his position. She could feel the weight of the moment, the power shift happening before her eyes. I think it's time the board sees the full extent of your actions, Emily added, her tone calm but resolute. Alex opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His usual eloquence was gone, replaced by a sense of panic. This wasn't just a corporate disagreement anymore. This was about his reputation, his career. Emily had taken the reins. With the evidence in her hands, she controlled the narrative. The board members looked between Emily and Alex, each one processing the gravity of the situation. No one dared to interrupt. The balance of power had shifted, and it was clear that Emily had emerged victorious in this silent battle of wills. She closed the dossier and leaned back in her chair, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over her. Alex, once so sure of himself, was now scrambling to hold on to what little authority he had left. I could feel the atmosphere shift as the room settled into an uncomfortable silence. Emily had just dealt the first blow, and Alex was left speechless. For a moment, it seemed as if time itself had frozen. But then, the tension started to build again, this time in a different direction. Alex, now visibly rattled, sat back in his chair, his hands resting on the table. His fingers drummed lightly, as if trying to regain his composure. Emily, on the other hand, remained calm, poised, as though nothing had changed. But inside she knew this was only the beginning. The board members were still processing the information she had presented. Eyes shifted from Alex to Emily, some faces showing sympathy for her, others merely curious about what would happen next. It was clear that Emily had thrown a wrench into Alex's well-oiled machine. But Alex wasn't about to go down without a fight. "You think this changes anything?" Alex finally spoke, his voice colder than before. His usual arrogance was now tinged with a sense of desperation. "You think revealing some old report is going to undo years of success?" Emily didn't flinch. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze fixed firmly on Alex. "What it changes, Alex," she said with a steady voice, "is that people will now see the truth. They'll see the lengths you've gone to in order to hide the reality of this company. They'll understand why I've been trying to expose this for so long." The room grew even quieter, as if everyone had just been waiting for Alex's next move. He had always been the one in control, the one calling the shots. But now, the dynamic had shifted. It wasn't just Emily who had power now, it was the truth. The truth was out, and no amount of charm or manipulation was going to cover it up. Alex opened his mouth as if to argue, but before he could say anything, one of the board members spoke up. "I think we need to take a moment to evaluate this," said Daniel, a senior member of the board, breaking the tense silence. "We can't ignore what Emily has presented." The others nodded in agreement. Alex's face darkened, but he knew he had no choice but to let the board process the information. He had been blindsided, and for the first time in years, he felt the weight of his own vulnerability. The board members turned their attention to the sealed dossier once more. Emily didn't need to say another word. The evidence had done all the talking for her. She could see the change in their eyes, the shift from doubt to understanding. Emily sat back in her chair, feeling a sense of quiet triumph. She had fought long and hard to get to this point, and now it was clear she had won. Alex, once so confident, was now a man on the defensive. He could feel the walls closing in on him. He tried to rally, but the damage had been done. The board was no longer looking at him the way they once had. Emily had turned the tables, and there was no going back. I could see the change in the room as the board members turned their focus from Alex to Emily. There was no turning back now. The evidence was laid out in front of them, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Alex was on the defensive. He shifted in his seat, his jaw clenched, but there was nothing he could do to take back what had been revealed. The board had already started talking among themselves, their murmurs growing louder. It was clear they were coming to the same conclusion. Emily had the upper hand, and Alex's credibility was slipping through his fingers. Alex tried to regain his composure, but the damage was done. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice strained. "This report is outdated, incomplete. It's nothing more than a smear campaign." Emily didn't flinch. She knew what Alex was trying to do, deflect, downplay, discredit the truth. But she wasn't going to let him get away with it. "Outdated or not," she replied calmly. The truth doesn't change. What's in that report speaks volumes about your actions, Alex. And no amount of spinning is going to erase the facts. The board members looked at each other, clearly torn. Some were still holding on to their loyalty to Alex, while others seemed to be quietly processing the weight of what Emily had presented. Finally, Daniel, the senior member of the board, spoke up again. We need to take this seriously, he said, his tone measured but firm. We cannot ignore the implications of what's been uncovered here. Alex opened his mouth, ready to argue, but Daniel raised a hand, signaling for him to stop. This is not the time, Alex, he said, shaking his head. We'll review the evidence thoroughly. Until then, I suggest you stay quiet. The room fell into a tense silence as the board members began to deliberate. Emily leaned back in her chair, her eyes fixed on Alex, watching as he squirmed. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of calm. The fight wasn't over yet, but she had planted the seed of doubt, and that was all she needed. Alex was no longer the unstoppable force he once was. Emily had shaken his foundation, and now it was only a matter of time before his empire started to crumble. As the board continued to discuss the matter, Alex's earlier arrogance had faded into something else entirely. He no longer seemed like the confident, untouchable leader he once was. Now, he was just a man trying to hold on to whatever power he had left. The room was divided, but one thing was clear: Emily had won this round. And as the meeting dragged on, she couldn't help but feel a small sense of victory. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for the truth, and that, in itself, felt like a triumph. I could feel the tension in the room as the meeting dragged on. Emily had made her point, and now it was up to the board members to decide how to move forward. Alex, once so sure of himself, now sat slumped in his chair, his face a mask of frustration. He had always been the one in control, the one who made the decisions, but now the tables had turned. His empire was slipping away, piece by piece. It was almost as if the weight of his own actions was finally catching up to him. As the discussions continued, Emily remained silent, her eyes never leaving Alex. She didn't need to say anything more. The evidence was clear, and it was only a matter of time before the board made their decision. She had won this battle, but she knew that the war wasn't over yet. In the back of her mind, she was already thinking about what came next. The power had shifted, but she had to make sure she kept it. Finally, after what felt like hours, the board members began to wrap up their discussions. Daniel, the senior member, stood up and cleared his throat. It is clear that we have a lot to consider, he said. We will need to review this evidence further, but for now, we are putting Alex's leadership under review. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Alex's face strained of color. He opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came out. The reality of the situation was sinking in. The board had made their move, and there was no going back. Emily watched as Alex sat there, his shoulders slumped, the weight of the decision settling on him. She knew that this was a turning point, not just for Alex, but for the entire company. The board had made their choice, and for the first time, Emily felt like she had a real chance at changing things. Alex was no longer the untouchable CEO. He was now just another leader under scrutiny, just like everyone else. As the meeting came to a close, the board members filed out of the room, leaving Alex and Emily alone. Alex stood up slowly, clearly still processing everything that had just happened. He turned to Emily, his expression conflicted. You think you've won, don't you? He said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. Instead, she simply stood up and met his gaze. No, Alex, she said, her voice steady. I think I've just begun. The room was silent, but the air between them was thick with the unspoken tension. Emily had taken the first step towards something bigger, something that would change the course of both their lives. She knew that. This was only the beginning. And though Alex had lost this round, she could see the fight still burning in his eyes. This wasn't over yet. I watched as Alex stood there, staring at me, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. He had been knocked down, but I could see the fire still burning in his eyes. He was calculating, plotting his next move, trying to figure out how to turn this situation around. I knew he wouldn't give up easily. "You think this is over?" he said quietly, his voice low but intense. "You've made a mistake, Emily." I raised an eyebrow, not intimidated. "I'm not the one making mistakes here, Alex," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You've had your time, and now the truth is coming out." He sneered, but it wasn't the same confident sneer I was used to. It was one of frustration, the kind that comes when someone realizes they no longer have control. For a moment, we just stood there, silently staring at each other, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on both of us. I could feel my heart pounding, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of what I had just done. I had exposed him. And now, there was no turning back. "You won't win this," Alex muttered, taking a step back, his eyes narrowing. "I'll find a way to fix this. You can't destroy everything I've built." I shook my head, my voice firm. "I'm not trying to destroy you, Alex. I'm just making sure the truth is out there. What you've done, the lies, the manipulation, it's not just about you anymore. It's about everyone who's been hurt by your actions." He looked at me, his jaw tightening, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, regret maybe, or fear. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual arrogance. "You think you can just take over?" he scoffed. "You don't have the experience, the connections, or the skills to run this company." "Maybe not," I said calmly. "But I know what's right. And that's more than enough." Alex didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing in the silence behind him. I stood there for a moment, watching him leave, a sense of accomplishment slowly washing over me. This was a huge step, but I knew the battle wasn't over. Alex would fight back, of course. He would use everything at his disposal to try and regain control. But now, I had the power. And that was something he couldn't take away. As I left the boardroom, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions, pride, relief, and a quiet excitement for what was to come. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for whatever Alex threw my way. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let him take it away. I could feel the weight of the moment as I walked out of the boardroom. Alex was gone, but the battle wasn't over yet. I knew that much. What I had just done was a massive step, but it was only the beginning. I had exposed the truth, and now there were others who would have to confront it. It was no longer just about Alex and me. It was about the future of the company, about everything we had both worked for, and about making sure no one else had to suffer because of his actions. The days that followed were tense. Alex didn't make any immediate moves, but I could tell he was plotting. He was the type of person who never stayed down for long. He had spent years building his empire, and he wasn't about to let it crumble without a fight. I kept a low profile for the next few days, focusing on keeping things moving forward in the company. I needed to show that I wasn't just a pawn in this game, that I was capable of leading. But I couldn't ignore the fact that Alex's influence was still a force to be reckoned with. He had allies, people in high places who believed in him and his methods. They weren't going to let go of their loyalty without a fight. One afternoon, I got a call from Daniel. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, his tone serious. I agreed to meet him in his office. As soon as I sat down, I could see the concern on his face. "Alex has been making moves," Daniel said, his voice low. "He's trying to rally support, and he's even speaking to the media. He's playing the victim, Emily. And it's gaining traction." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had anticipated something like this, but hearing it confirmed made it feel all too real. "What's the board saying?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "They're divided," Daniel replied. "Some are backing you, others are hesitant. They're not sure if your actions were the right move." The word stung, but I knew this was part of the process. Change was never easy, and I had to be prepared for the fact that not everyone would be on my side. I didn't do this to make friends, I said, my voice steady. I did it to make sure we're doing the right thing. Alex's actions have hurt this company, and if we don't act now, we'll all pay the price. Daniel nodded slowly, his expression softening. I know. But you need to be careful. Alex is powerful, and he knows how to play the game. I leaned forward, determination in my eyes. I'm not afraid of him. And I'm not going to back down. Daniel sat back in his chair, a thoughtful look crossing his face. I believe in you, Emily. But you're going to need more than just the truth to win this. You're going to need strategy. I left his office that day feeling more resolute than ever. Alex wasn't going to win this fight. Not if I could help it. I had the truth on my side, and I was ready to do whatever it took to see this through. I knew that things were about to get more complicated. Alex's media campaign was gaining traction, and his loyal supporters were rallying around him. It wasn't just about the truth anymore, it was about shaping the narrative. I had to act quickly. I spent the next few days in overdrive, meeting with key board members and reinforcing my position. But it wasn't enough. Alex's influence was still strong. People who had once respected me now questioned my ability to lead. Doubts were creeping in, and I couldn't afford to let them grow. I needed something more, something that would give me the edge. I spent hours going over the company's financial records, searching for any new evidence that could turn the tide in my favor. Finally, I found it. Hidden in the depths of the records was a series of transactions that Alex had tried to cover up. They were subtle, but the pattern was clear. Alex had been funneling company money into personal accounts. It wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was the smoking gun I had been waiting for. Armed with this new information, I called a meeting with Daniel. I've got something, I told him, my voice steady but urgent. It's not just about the report anymore. It's about fraud. Daniel's eyes widened as I handed him the documents. He studied them carefully before looking up at me. This changes everything, he said softly. Alex is done. I nodded, feeling a surge of confidence. But I knew that this wasn't a victory yet. I had to make sure that the board saw this evidence and understood its gravity. That meant facing Alex head-on. The next day, I called for another board meeting. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone gathered around the table. Alex walked in, his usual cocky demeanor now replaced with a hint of unease. He knew things weren't going his way. As soon as the meeting began, I laid the evidence on the table. I watched as Alex's face strained of color when he saw the financial documents. He tried to hide it, but it was too late. The board was already turning on him. This is it, Alex, I said calmly, my voice cutting through the silence. You've crossed the line this time. And there's no way out. For a moment he didn't speak. He just stared at the papers in front of him, his mind racing. Finally, he broke the silence. You can't do this, he said, his voice shaking. You have no idea what you're up against. But it didn't matter anymore. The board had already made up their minds. Alex's reign was over. I could feel the shift in the room as the board members rallied behind me. It wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore. It was about restoring integrity to the company. And I was the one who had the courage to do it. I could feel the air shift as the board members took in the evidence I had presented. Alex's face was ashen, his earlier defiance replaced with a cold, calculating stare. He knew the game was over. There was no way out this time. The financial documents I had uncovered were irrefutable. They exposed everything, the illegal transactions, the manipulation, the betrayal of trust. There was nothing Alex could say to spin this. His empire had begun to crumble. This is beyond the company, Alex, I said, my voice calm but firm. This is about accountability. You've broken the law, and now you have to answer for it. The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. No one moved, no one spoke. But I could see it in their eyes. They knew what needed to be done. One by one, the board members began to speak. Some voiced their disappointment, others their concern for the company's future. But the consensus was clear. Alex was no longer fit to lead. The decision was made. The vote was unanimous. Alex was officially removed from his position as CEO. It felt surreal. After everything that had happened, after all the lies and manipulation, it was finally over. But as the meeting adjourned and the board members filed out of the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The company had been through a lot, and there was still a long road ahead. Rebuilding trust, restoring integrity, these were the challenges I would face next. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I had done what needed to be done. The truth had prevailed. As I walked out of the boardroom, I saw Daniel waiting for me in the hallway. He smiled at me, a look of approval in his eyes. "You did it," he said simply. "You took him down." I nodded, feeling a quiet sense of pride. "We did it," I corrected him. "This wasn't just me. It was the board, it was everyone who saw what was right." Daniel chuckled. "Still, you were the one who had the courage to step up. You made it happen." I couldn't help but smile. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready. I had already faced the hardest part. And now, with the truth on my side, I knew that nothing could stop me. The company had a new direction, and with that came a new beginning.